started. Thank you. Again, my name is Manny Leon. I am an assistant director with the Office of Early Academic Outreach here at the University of Arizona. And I do work specifically with the MESA program. MESA stands for Math, Engineering, Science Achievement. It's a STEM outreach program that works with students in grades 6 through 12 who are, we target a low-income first-generation college-bound ethnic minority students. In response to the COVID pandemic, one of the things we've wanted to do is expand our program offerings, our virtual offerings, to still provide students with exposure to STEM, exposure to role models. And we were very fortunate that the University of Arizona Cancer Center reached out to us, and we're looking to get engaged. And we're going to be the very first of our, what we hope to be an ongoing series of STEM panels this year. So we're super excited to have 4 folks from the university working with the University of Arizona Cancer Center speaking with us today. Next slide, please. As we get started, I do want to take the time to recognize that the University of Arizona resides on the traditional land of the Tana Atam, and that Arizona is home to many Native people, both past and present, whose knowledge, skills, and abilities in STEM built the foundations of the land on which we reside, and whose contributions are integral to and essential to our state's success now and into the future. And so we wanted to share, because we know people are calling in from all over the place, right? It's not just about where I happen to be located or where my work happens to be located, but wanted to recognize all of the tribal lands that are a part of Arizona. So we have this map, but there's also a great resource. There's a link there where it's a project that maps out kind of, you put almost any address, I think, in the world, and it'll kind of tell you what Native peoples have resided in that land. Thanks, Bill, for posting that into the chat. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to start off with, so we've got a set of questions that we are going to ask our panelists. But if you do have any other questions for those in the audience, feel free to pop those into the chat. We will be watching that chat, and we'll pull your questions in. But our first question, what we'll start off with, is we're going to ask each of our presenters to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their themselves and their educational journey, and a little bit about the work or research that they're doing with the Cancer Center. And so our first panelist will be Shanoa Nez.
Hi, I'm Shanoa Nez, and I am an undergrad student here at the University of Arizona. I'm going into my senior year, and I'm studying molecular and cellular biology with a minor in public health. I am originally here from Arizona. I'm half Navajo, so I come from Delcon, Arizona, but I currently live in Rapid City, South Dakota. So I'm pretty far away from home. So right now I work with Dr. Robin Harris in the Epi department at the School of Public Health. And right now we're working and looking at Helicobacter pylori and its relationship to gastric cancer. But for me, the research that I've been doing so far is that I have been looking at gallbladder disease and its association to Helicobacter pylori.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time. Our next panelist, for the next slide, will be Dr. Magdiel Habila. I think the slide, we may have lost some information on there. I apologize for that. Maybe
no worries.
There we go.
It's there's a bunch of animations in here, so please bear with me. So hi everyone, I'm Magdiel Habila. It's good to be here with all of you. I am currently a second year doctoral student in the epidemiology program here at the College of Public Health at the University of Arizona. And so a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Jos, that city that's circled in Nigeria in Africa. And I moved to Kentucky when I was 9. And I lived in Louisville until about the end of high school, or the end of my sophomore year in high school. And then when my family moved to Washington, I had the privilege of enrolling in community college as part of a program called Running Start that lets high school students enroll in community college classes to earn credit, both college credit and high school credit, to finish out the degree. And so while I was there, I worked towards my associate's degree in biology. After I graduated, I started my undergrad degree at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, where I got a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology. And then after that, I took a year off because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life yet. And so I took a gap year and I worked as a paraeducator at Lakota Middle School, which is one of the feeder schools for the high school that I went to in Washington. And I was there working with 7th and 8th grade students who had different learning disabilities. And so during that year, I worked towards studying for my GRE so that I could apply to graduate school. And after that year was over, I accepted and moved down to Tucson to start my Master's of Public Health here at the University of Arizona, where I studied epidemiology. And then I finished my master's and started my PhD right away, after my master's, also in epidemiology. And so currently at the Cancer Center, I'm working on a couple of projects that are focused on determining individual characteristics that influence colorectal cancer progression from kind of the precursor stage all the way through disease progression. And I'm also working towards kind of being able to look at the disparities that are associated with cervical cancer incidence. So looking at whether people have their HPV vaccine or not, and looking at whether they have access to screening. And ultimately, after my PhD, I would look to go back to my hometown to continue to study cervical cancer there, because there is a large burden there for African women. So thank you all.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then next we have Dr. Echo Warner. Same question.
Hi, everyone. I'm Echo Warner. Can you all see me? I can't see myself anymore. Well, hopefully you can see me. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in Utah, in a northeastern part of the state called Altamont, which is very, very small. So I grew up in an extremely rural area, 1.5 hours to travel to the nearest hospital from my parents' hometown. I also am the first person in my family to get a doctorate degree. Neither of my parents went to college, and so I'm what is considered a first-generation college student and college graduate. I started working towards my college degrees when I was in high school as well. So I did the concurrent enrollment program through Utah State University and finished my associate's degree at that time in science. And then I applied to the University of Utah to pursue a bachelor's degree in behavioral science and health. I knew all along that I was really interested in health, but I never really knew exactly what I wanted to do. An older brother of mine became a dentist, and at first I thought I wanted to be just like him and go to dental school. And I did a summer internship in a dentist's office and decided that I didn't like staring at teeth all day long. And at that same time, I was completing an elective class that was for graduate students, but I had gotten special permission to take the course because of my background in behavioral science. And the class was a public health and global health class. And I fell in love with public health at that time. I applied to the master's program in public health at the University of Utah and was very excited to be accepted. I was really interested at the time in working with rural and underserved communities. I did a study abroad for a summer in Ghana, Africa, studying childhood poisonings. And that really motivated me towards my interest of working with pediatric populations. And so during my master's degree, I started working at the Huntsman Cancer Institute that's affiliated with the University of Utah. Up until that point, it was really tricky for me to figure out where I was going because I didn't have a lot of guidance from the people around me as far as educational paths. But I was really fortunate once I got to my master's program that I was able to start working with a wonderful mentor. Her name's Dr. Ann Kirchhoff at the University of Utah, and she really facilitated an entry to research for me during my master's program. At some point, a couple of years into that, I realized that I really was interested in designing my own research studies, and I had a lot of questions about cancer and childhood that I felt were important to answer, and were questions that could both add to the scientific literature, but also contribute to the communities in Utah. And so this kind of goes back to my rural hometown and growing up where it's really hard to access healthcare and not having very much education about cancer and cancer prevention. And so I got really interested in all of those dynamics, and that led me to pursue a PhD. And so my PhD was through the College of Nursing at the University of Utah. And the reason that I applied to the College of Nursing is that that's where all of the faculty are positioned who do cancer caregiving research. And so a big part of my research now is looking at how families and communities go through the experience of a cancer diagnosis together and what that looks like, especially for the cancer patient and their immediate caregiver, what kind of supports they have available to them to help them with everything outside of the medical part of a cancer diagnosis. So I'm interested in social support, I'm interested in education and employment and financial toxicity and things like that. And so once I finished my PhD, I applied to the University of Arizona, which has a cancer health disparities postdoctoral fellowship program. When I was applying for my bachelor's degree, I had no idea what a PhD was, let alone a postdoc. So in case anyone else here isn't familiar with that term, a postdoc is a process that you go through after you're finishing your PhD. You have 2 to 5-ish years usually, where you can kind of hone in your research skills and work on developing your research ideas while you're still getting some mentorship before you apply for a faculty position. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'm really excited to be at the University of Arizona because I've been able to connect with some wonderful mentors who are helping me design studies using social media and looking at the exchange of cancer-related information on online and digital formats. So that's what my focus is in right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. And then our fourth panelist is Dr. David Garcia. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you. Can you all see me? Because I have no idea.
Yes, we see you.
All right. Yeah, just the view changes. So I feel the same way, Echo. I'm just talking into this void. So anyhow, welcome to everybody and the students. And it's great. It's hard to follow all that up, what's unique paths. And so I'm actually from Arizona as well, in rural Arizona. I was born in Sierra Vista, which is basically on the border. I have that picture for those not familiar. I actually went to high school in Tombstone, Arizona, which is literally in the middle of nowhere, and was bused in about 20 plus miles every day for 4 years. And in fact, we had no lunch. Our cafeteria, in fact, we would go on Allen Street, which was the main street, for lunch every day until my senior year. Next animation, please. So this looks like a linear path, but it's not. I think along the way, and I think that was one of the common themes, that sometimes, we have our best laid plans, but life kind of throws curveballs at us. And, you know, I was also a first generation student. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually started at the U of A, not Slippery Rock University. But my best friend and brother at the time from high school got hurt within the first week of me being at the U of A. And to be honest, you know, I dropped out. I dropped out at the U of A. I went to Pima for a year, really couldn't find my footing of what I wanted to do as far as academics. My parents at the time separated, and my dad went to Slippery Rock University, Grove City area, which is again in the middle of nowhere, off of I-80 in Pennsylvania. It's off the snow belt. So imagine going from Arizona to a snow belt. Needless to say, it helped me focus though. It took me about 2 years to go through my undergrad because I simply was just living at the gym or in the library. So always a recommendation to students is if you want to focus, go somewhere that you have to pretty much be inside all the time due to the weather. But you know, it was really there though that I learned I found my passion, which was exercise science. Exercise science, again, going back to like what you plan for and what you do. Exercise science is a degree that is either used to, you can be a personal trainer or whatever, or also like a pre-med background to go into medical school or physical therapy. And similar to Echo, I went and did physical therapy shadowing, and I absolutely just did not like it. It was not for me. You know, just getting that experience just showed me, I was like, yeah, that's not something I want to do. And similar probably to most, I thought that, you know, going to med school would be it. But then the next animation, I had the opportunity to go do an internship experience at the University of Pittsburgh under John Chakisik, who's one of the leaders in like physical activity and weight management. Through my internship as an undergrad, I found my passion. I found that you could influence people's behavior change through diet and physical activity to help them lose weight. How that affected, you know, all aspects of their health, mental health, and so forth. And it was a way to interact. Also, I'm a very people-oriented person, and so I actually stayed there for my master's in exercise physiology and my PhD as an exercise physiologist. And basically, through that training, I became an expert in obesity prevention and treatment. Next animation. And similar to Echo again, I had the opportunity to come back to the U of A and the Cancer Center as, at the time, as an R25 fellowship, so in cancer prevention and control, as a postdoc. And since then transitioned into an assistant professor position in public health. So I'm actually a 5th year assistant professor. My area of focus is largely developing lifestyle intervention programs for Hispanic communities and within the context of community outreach and engagement. So I'm also the assistant director for community outreach and engagement for the Cancer Center. So my passion generally is working with our communities, making sure that people know, including you students, that we do have access to health, but also we have the ability or we have the choice to change our paths. And I think each of the speakers so far has demonstrated that we all have a unique path of how we got where we are. But in addition, that it wasn't just a linear line. There's a lot of bumps along the way, and I'm happy to speak with you about our persistence, of course. So welcome, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for sharing that. It's very interesting to hear about your journeys and how they kind of differed but led to similar places. It's really interesting. So I know some of you touched upon this in your introductions, and I don't know if you may want to expand a little bit more. But our next question was, when did you first know that you wanted to work in the field that you're working now? And then if it was something that kind of almost happened by accident, was there a connection to the kind of the things that you're interested in the past that it makes kind of like, oh, it makes sense that I went this way now looking back. It's always easier to look, hindsight's 20/20. So yeah, so what led you to kind of, when did you know you wanted to get into this field, and was there a connection to the past? And, you know, take it, whoever wants to go first, feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in quickly. For me, and I think most individuals, and this is just in our field, it was personal for me. Like I always knew I wanted to help people as a child because I saw a lot of people affected by chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and so forth. And so I think that's like largely where we always think that medicine is the key, like, oh, I have to be a doctor, but realizing that you can change people's lives in other ways. And when we find public health or reducing health disparities through, being part of the cancer center and so forth. And so I always had that in the back of my mind, but again, my aha moment was getting those experiences with, through volunteering, internships, and so forth. It allows you that space to kind of have your aha moment. And for me, that's what I found at the University of Pittsburgh. So always had the passion. It's just, I found the way to kind of harness it through my experiences.
I'll go next. I actually kind of forgot to talk about like my high school experience going into undergrad, but I grew up in Rapid City, like I said before, and it's also a very small town, probably smaller than Tucson. But it's in a pretty rural area, and I kind of realized that people weren't really like going anywhere new, like traveling to different schools. Like when you would go talk to the advisors, they would kind of like shove like SDSU or USD, which is like the local state schools, like down your throat, not really like giving you the opportunity to apply out of state. So I was kind of wanting to be that student who did something different. I was wanting to grow somewhere and find like a new sense of independence, because students would just come home like every other weekend. And I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to, I guess, grow as an adult and also kind of figure out like my own path and find new opportunities that can be done outside of South Dakota. But I am not really surprised about the fact that I'm wanting to go the public health route and then possibly medical school afterwards. I was really blessed to have a very strong family who are all doctors and work in the public health field. So I guess they kind of like molded me in that sense, which is why when I had like an aha moment when I finally took a public health course my junior year. And I realized that like I just excelled at it. It came naturally. It was really easy for me to understand, follow along with all of the information. A lot of the information I already knew because of my family. So I think that's kind of why I am deciding the track that I'm going to continue on, is because it was something that I've just like always wanted as a kid, to like help people, to, I guess, not only like help people, but also I guess like help my tribe, since I am half Navajo. But I just never thought until probably my sophomore junior year that you can do that and not have to go to medical school.
I can go next for this one. I think similar to Dr. Garcia, I also thought I wanted to go to med school when I was really young. And so where I come from, women aren't doctors. But there was this one woman that my parents were really close with. And she and her husband ran a clinic in the city where I lived. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, you get to love your job and like be this really special person and get to help all of these people. And I just like, I wanted to be exactly like her. And so everything that I did from that moment on was working towards going to medical school. Because my parents didn't go to college until I was in college, interestingly enough. They weren't really able to provide any kind of guidance for me. And being in the US, it was challenging because it was a new system that they were unfamiliar with, and they didn't know a lot of people who were familiar with the system as well. And so I ended up doing a lot of research into like, how do you get into medical school? What classes do you take? What major do you need? All of that good stuff. And so when I started in college, I still thought I was going to medical school until after I took organic chemistry. And then I was like, no, I don't ever want to do this ever again. This is terrible. And so it was right after that that I declared my psychology major, because I'd taken a class in community college when I was still in high school, and I loved it. Like, I loved the research side. I loved that you got to interact with people, but it was still so structured and how you do things in that field. And like, I fell in love with it. And so that's how I ended up getting my degree there. But I also knew that I didn't really want to stay in that field for my career, which is why I ended up taking the year off after undergrad. But then it was during my last semester of undergrad, I was in a social justice class where we talked about all sorts of disparities, whether that was environmental health disparities, cancer health disparities, racial disparities, all of the disparities. And that was when I was introduced to the concept of a health disparity and what that meant, and how oftentimes those are very preventable things. And so I started looking into the field of public health, and like through reading all of these papers and reading people's bios and things, I thought, okay, I could do this. And so then I came to MESA and I started my master's program. And it was after my first epidemiology class that I was like, this is the one. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But it did take me significantly longer, I think, to get to where I knew for sure that I wanted to do epidemiology, because I didn't know anyone who'd done it. And so I kind of had to experience it for myself.
Okay, I think I am the last one here. So I talked a little bit about transitioning into my master's program and getting involved in cancer during that time. But when I think back across my life about what really motivated me to want to be in this field, it goes way, way back to being a child. And my mom has always been someone who is very adamant about eating healthy and making healthy choices. And I think her focus on health is something that influenced me all throughout my life. And I have always been interested in health. But when I was in high school and even in early undergrad, I was really interested in like physical activity and diet and exercise. And so I thought that I actually looked at exercise sports science degrees because I thought maybe that would be something that I'd be interested in. I knew I didn't really want to go to medical school. I just didn't really know. And like some of the other panelists have said, I didn't have a lot of guidance. Like there were academic advisors, but I didn't know really how to leverage an academic advisor in a smart way. And so I just felt like I floundered a little bit during undergrad. But the thing that I always knew is that I was interested in health. And the other thing that I think was an influence of where I grew up is that the community I grew up in is very service oriented. And my parents are people who, you know, you've heard that saying, like they'd give you the shirt off of their back if you needed their help. Like they're very service oriented. And so that was something that was also ingrained in me from a very young age. And I knew that I was interested in health and I wanted to be able to help other people. And so when I started taking classes in my public health program, and I started realizing that one of the big differences between public health and medicine is that medicine is very focused on individual health. And public health, on the other hand, as the name implies, is focused on the public and communities and the world. It's everyone around us and all of the things that influence our health. And so that was really appealing to me because it sort of hit on both my desire to provide service to the communities where I was working and also on this focus on health that I have. It took me a little while, even during my master's program, to decide and kind of like settle in on a cancer focus. most of my master's program and all of undergrad, I worked at Old Navy as a customer service manager. So I'm really good at coordinating your outfits if anyone ever needs that. But eventually, and like I applied to so many jobs at the university that were health related, and I was just like constantly trying to get my foot in the door, and it took a long time. But eventually I found a research assistant job at the Cancer Institute, and like many others have said, I had wonderful mentorship there. And I think that it was once I started working in that research assistant job, my master's thesis was focused on BMI and cancer survivorship, which still sort of related to my interest in health and diets and activity and all of that. But then it sort of had this like cancer framing. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, there are all of these opportunities to improve the lives of cancer patients and their families. And it just opened up a whole new world to me. So that was really motivating for me. And one thing I just wanted to add before I finish up is that in listening to the other panelists, I think one thing that kind of is a consistent theme that I'm seeing is that we all seem to have some level of curiosity that has pushed us forward. And I think that being curious about the world and about research is something that can be really inspiring and motivating. And I know that for me, in pursuing a doctorate degree and developing a research program, that curiosity and like constantly wanting to learn is something that has always been a huge motivator for me. And when I was thinking like, what do I imagine myself doing for the rest of my life? I know I'm really good at school. I've been doing school for a very long time and I'm good at learning. And so I thought a lot about like, what can I do where I can always be learning and always answering questions and satisfying this nature that I have. And that was really another reason why I knew that research would be a good field for me.
Great, yeah, thank you all so much. It was wonderful insight into, there's, I think, a variety of paths, but there's always something that will kind of tie, whether it's an experience you had, it's people that you're exposed to, right? Family support systems, a lot of that all plays. And you can enter kind of that field, right? Either you know it from right at the beginning, or you kind of figure it out as you're going along. So for those that are joining us today, you don't have to have it all figured out after high school. Is part of what I'm hearing, right? Give yourself the freedom to say, I'll just be open to new experiences, and as I experience different things, I'll find my way as I talk to people and look for opportunities and be willing to try different things, right? So thank you. And I think you hit on kind of where we're going with our next question. And before I ask our next question, I did want to remind our audience members, if you have any questions you'd like to ask of the panel members, please go ahead and put those into the chat. We've got a couple more. We've got about 20 minutes left. So if you do have any questions, we want to be able to get to them. But our next question, as we're waiting for them to come in, kind of ties a little bit to what you were just speaking about, Echo, with that motivation piece. Was there ever a time where you felt like you didn't belong, either in your field or on the path you were on? And when you had that, how did you get past that? What allowed you to kind of continue and push through?
Maybe I'll go first since I went last time. I'll give the rest of you some time to think. So I constantly feel like I don't fit in my field. And I think that impression, we talk about it being called imposter syndrome, that like, I don't belong here. I didn't grow up in an academic family. I didn't know doctors or nurses growing up. Like I constantly battle that. And I think that there were two specific times that really, I felt that really strongly. And one was in high school. My academic advisor told me, don't apply to the University of Utah. no one from our high school goes to school there. Like, apply to this community college, just don't even try. And I was like, well, I think I'm gonna do it. And I'm also applying for these scholarships. And he just laughed at me. He was like, you're not getting any scholarships, but sure, whatever, go ahead and apply. And I did. I didn't pay a penny out of pocket for undergrad because I had scholarships. And so that taught me resiliency. Like, if someone tells you you're not good enough or you don't fit here, find another mentor, find someone who believes in you and is an advocate for you. And the other thing that I wanted to say is just that whenever I feel like that, I've worked really hard to cultivate a network of colleagues and friends and even family members who I can go to. And it's a safe space to say, hey, like, this awful thing happened, or like, I didn't get this grant that I applied for, or this award that I thought I wanted. And it's good to have those sounding boards and support people. And if you don't have that in your personal life, then I would encourage you to seek out mentors, because there are mentors like all of us here who are on your side, and we want you to succeed.
I'll go next. I actually kind of had the same experience as Echo my high school year when I was applying to not graduate programs, when I was applying to college. I did not send in an application for USD or SDSU at all. I told my advisor, I was like, I refuse to apply to any South Dakota schools. And she kind of was a little offended at the fact that I told her that I refused to stay in South Dakota for 4 more years. But luckily, I had a really strong family support who luckily were able to guide me through the process of applying to college. So when I decided to finally come to the University of Arizona, I chose molecular and cellular biology because I love biology. I love looking at it from, I guess, like a more in-depth position. But I think probably around my junior year, when I was getting into my upper division courses, is when I started to question if I wanted to change my major, because I wasn't doing well in my courses. I wasn't understanding the material anymore. But also, like Echo said, I created a very strong support system. I had a very strong support system with faculty. So like my PI, she really helps me through that. And then I also had my family support system, and then my friends. I highly recommend, because sometimes you can't talk to your family about things that are really affecting you. So I really recommend creating a strong friendship, like with people in general. They can be a sounding board, like was just stated, and they're in your shoes too, so they understand right now like what you're going through. Like, college is different from when your PI did it, from when your parents were in college. So sometimes there's like a misunderstanding that happens where you're like talking like, oh, I failed this exam. They're like, well, I took that class and I did fine in it, but that class was like, think about it, they took it like 15 years ago. So when you talk to someone that's in the class who didn't do as well with you, you're like, okay, let's like talk, like figure out what happened. Like, where did we go wrong during this exam? And I think that's like what really helps me was my friends telling me like, it'll be okay, it's just one exam. And then also like just talking to, I guess, my PI and like different programs that I'm in on how to receive help properly is a huge thing. So going to tutoring, going to office hours, I guess talking to the TAs, because they took the class not too long ago, and they're literally the eyes and ears for the teacher, for your professor. So they sometimes even have like a stronger understanding of what the professor wants from their students than what you can guess. And that definitely helps me get through that rough patch last year.
I can go next. So I think similar to what Echo said, I still feel very often out of place in my field. And that's not necessarily a new feeling for me. Where I went to undergrad, I was always one of at least one of usually two people of color in every single class that I took. And so I have never, not never, very rarely have I ever walked into a room where I was not the minority. And so I've gotten really used to that. But one thing that continues to challenge me, I think, in that is to think about, like, even now as a doctoral student, like, though I'm still new to the field, is to think about the fact that there are other people like me who walk into spaces that were maybe not created for them. And the fact that I'm there means that I can kind of start paving the way for someone else to come after me and feel a little bit more welcome. And the person after them will feel a little bit more welcome. And so I think of it as a really empowering position that I am privileged enough to be in spaces that were not created for people with my background and with my different things that we all have, you know. And so I think, like has already been said, is having people around you who support you that can kind of help to validate your experience, but also put all of those things in check. I think, like, when class gets hard and you're stressed out and you're tired because you're not sleeping, having someone to tell you to sleep because, like, there will always be tomorrow is so important. And it seems really like a really simple thing, but I still need people like today who like text me and are like, Magdal, did you eat today? Like, you know, just little things like that. Just because it means a lot to know that there's someone out there who is looking out for you and your well-being, because it's stressful to be in school for so long. And I think also just working really hard to learn, because that is part of what it means to be in an academic setting. And so putting myself in positions where I'm able to foster relationships with other students and other faculty members, other staff members that'll teach me something about the world that I don't already have. And I think what that does is that it makes me more prepared to work in cancer disparities, because the more exposure I have to different voices and different perspectives, it enables me to be able to do that better for someone else in the future. And so just to echo everything that has already been said about, like, having networks and having support, but also just being comfortable in your own skin and learning to be different, because a lot of times that is what is going to give you a leg up in some of the spaces that you'll be in.
I got nothing left to say. It was all amazing. No, you know, Echo said the imposter syndrome. Of course, it happens. It happens every day. You know, as first generation students, most of us, like, to be in our positions, like, we are privileged. And I think, you know, I've always been taught, no matter how high you go, no matter whatever happens, it's always to stay humble and never forget where you come from. And so much to Magdal just said, like, then it's our job to bring others up. So, you know, like, through my program, I train students, I give them those opportunities to find out, like, what's best for them. And then also have those discussions about how do you play the game. So in fact, all of you students who are on this call right now, or the Zoom, you're understanding what's happened for us, but also, like, it's a game. In reality, I feel like it's a game. And it's constantly played at different levels as you go through academia. So, you know, between doctoral students, postdoc, even at my level, going into associate professor, I am playing this chess game with everybody else. And so it's learning how to play that. It's learning how to take advantage of TAs. It's how do you have discussions with your professors? Again, it's all part of that, and realizing that you have every resource available to you. That was one thing that I didn't realize as a student, that, like, there are protections for students. Like, if you encounter hardship, you know, and I referenced that I dropped out, no one told me my options. You know, I just did what I thought was best at that time, but I wasn't, no one had a discussion with me. I had to learn the hard way. So I think, you know, my advice to you is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, and being an academic or being anything as far as a lifelong learner, it's about being persistent And when you get knocked down, and you will, because we all do, can you get back up? And as long as you can keep getting back up, you're going to be successful. So it is a road, though, that can be traveled by everybody, in fact, if you just have the opportunities afforded to you.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you all so much. That was great. I think there's a lot that folks that are on the line or maybe watch later will be able to relate to, and really it's like, yo, that speaks to me. I think, you hit a lot of things that I've learned over the years too, right? Persistence, finding the right support, asking for help. I know that's really hard for some people at times, is to be able to ask for help, but it can really make a big difference. And you guys are so good. You're like hitting on my questions before I even get to ask them. We talked. So my next question was going to be about support people, and you all talked a little bit about that, and we are already at 50 minutes, which is time flew. But I was going to see if there was any, like, are there particular places or particular people you would suggest that students, when they do get into those tough spaces, or where they get onto campus, or where they're in unfamiliar territory, or might be the only person in the class that they feel, that's like them. When you're looking for the support, what kind of suggestions would you give to people as far as finding that? Or if you have another piece, then my next question, because we might run out of time, would be, if you had one last piece of advice to give to middle or high school students about continuing on their path, what would you give? So I hope that wasn't too much to throw at you.
I'll start it off, since we'll keep reverse order, because I do want to give some time for the students actually to ask any questions. Just ask. Like, no, like, for me, I really appreciate when students just reach out, anybody, and just say, hey, could we have a brief discussion? Don't be afraid to go up and say hi to people. That's how you get your mentoring team, and you'll learn that throughout. Even as we go to like professional conferences and so forth. Sometimes it's just that first impression that makes everything, and it helps establish that connection. So for instance, if anyone were to ask a question, you may find a lifelong mentor actually in this setting right now. So again, everybody's very willing to help, and sometimes you just put yourself out there. You'd be surprised what's going to happen.
I'll echo what David said. I think that being open with your faculty, and especially I wish if I could talk to my younger self, I would say use your advisors. That's what they're there for. Like, don't be afraid of them, don't be intimidated. And the same thing with your professors, like, go to office hours, drop them an email. They're people, and the vast majority of them are very willing to help. Yeah, that's it.
I would say be your number one fan, and also be your own advocate, because I've learned that a professor or like a T is not going to come up to you. They're not going to know that you need help. They're not going to know that you're struggling. Your advisor is not going to know that you're looking for an internship. So by you advocating for yourself, it's opening doors for you.
The only thing that I would add to that, well, I think there's two things. The first thing I would say to my younger self is that grades are important, but they're not everything. And so it is super important to do things that you love. So I started playing violin when I was in elementary school, and I kept doing that all the way through high school, and that ended up paying for half of my college. Like, it just happened to be this thing that I could do, and that ended up really benefiting me. And so I think, like, definitely have good grades, but also do things that you love, because you never know where that'll take you. And then also it's good to have a plan. If anyone else is a planner, I'm a huge planner. So like, yes, have a plan, but also have like several backup plans for when the first plan goes awry, so that you're not left kind of scrambling for what to do next. And those are, I think, in addition to what has been said, it's what I would do.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, at this time, I haven't seen anything pop in the chat, but if anybody wanted to pop any last minute questions, or if anybody wanted to kind of pop off of mute and ask your question directly, I think we'd welcome that also at this time. So I'm going to go into a few seconds of silence to allow anybody to kind of jump in at this point. You just keep that first person and then they'll come rolling in. But if not, we know it's late in the day. Everybody's probably really tired of being on Zoom also. So that's okay. So we do have a couple minutes left. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about the Cancer Center and the outreach that they do. So I didn't know if David or Margaret, who was the one that kind of made the connection. Thank you, Margaret. I know she was on the call. If you all wanted to say a little bit about the work that the Cancer Center does, and then how they outreach to the community or opportunities that students might have to connect.
Sure, I'll talk for just a few minutes. You've heard the students talk about different programs that they were in, and so I just want to just echo what they said. By often you figure out what you want to do because an opportunity presents itself. So kind of look for those opportunities and then take them. But there's a lot of opportunities, I think, at all research universities where you can get involved in projects as a student. You can get paid to do that. And that's just a great way to experience different kind of careers and figure out, is this what I really want to spend a lot of time doing? And that's how I got involved in research. Is I heard about an opportunity and I went. And the first day that I was in a lab doing an experiment, I just knew that's what I want to do.
I'll just add to that. So through the community outreach and engagement team, we also provide a lot of opportunities, or will start working with Margaret to have educational but training within the context of research. So kind of making that bridge, and not just specific to community outreach and engagement for cancer prevention control, but if you're interested, for instance, in cancer biology, we have different programs within the Cancer Center, therapeutics, imaging as well. So I think there is a lot of buckets that we can help contribute. And again, there is no, I said dumb question. So, the students, if you're fine, you're quiet right now, but please feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have a question or just want to get engaged. And again, it really is just, if you look at the panelists and even Margaret right now, we all got to start somewhere because someone gave us a shot. And whether it's volunteering or whatever, like that's ultimately how you're going to find what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I think, honestly, we're very lucky. Like our jobs, our careers are to, just like Echo had said, is be curious. And my biggest job is to develop programs that help people. And so it's not hard to be at the office, quote unquote, when that's what we're trying to do. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm currently a part of NACP, which is the Native American Cancer Prevention, which is actually run by Dr. Briel. And I have done 2 internships my entire college career. So if anyone has any questions on where to apply or even where to look, or if you're wanting to apply to UVERB or an NACP, I am definitely a great person to talk to.
Thank you, Shanoa.
Yeah, great. And I know I don't think we got a chance to share contact information. So I don't know if you guys wanted to pop things into the chat, or anybody that's on the call, feel free to reach out to us. I think our contact information was in the emails you've been sending when you registered, and we'd be happy to make that connection for you as well. And that does about wrap it up. I didn't know, we'll give one last chance. If anybody had any questions, or if we have any final words from our panelists? Don't feel pressured. You don't have to. You guys said a lot of really great things. We appreciate that for sure.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so I